For those of you who are new here, the International Achievers is a student led initiative focused on making career exploration feel more accessible and human through conversations with professionals and students from different fields. Our goal is to help students hear stories, understand different career paths, and feel more confident exploring their own journeys. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'm really excited about today's session because I know many of our attendees are interested in medicine, healthcare, engineering, and research, and today's speaker brings experience across all of those areas. Today, we're joined by Shobana Santhanam. Shobana recently graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in biomedical engineering and will be starting medical school this fall at the Medical College of Georgia as a Harrison Scholar. Her experiences span both engineering and medicine, including cardiovascular engineering research and clinical work as an ophthalmology technician. I'm really excited for today's conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Shobana.
Of course, happy to be here.
Awesome. To start us off, I'd love to begin with your journey. Can you maybe walk us through your journey so far, starting from high school, when you became first interested in medicine or science, choosing to go to biomedical engineering at Georgia Tech, and now deciding to pursue medical school?
Sure. I'll try to be succinct. I started my sort of STEM journey in high school. I went to a STEM-based public school in my hometown. I'm from Georgia, and I went to a county high school, so everyone from the county was sort of eligible to get into the school through a lottery system. So, it was a pretty small school, so we had a lot of opportunities to dabble in research and also in different aspects of engineering, which is when I first started to get interested. Um, and then in terms of going to Georgia Tech, for me, it made the most sense because I am from Georgia, so it gives me a very easy advantage in terms of getting in. But I would recommend it to anyone who's really interested in engineering. The school supports research opportunities, industry opportunities in terms of co-ops and internships very well. There's lots of opportunities to learn about other fields in case you want to minor or pursue research in a major that isn't your own. They're very open to doing that, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, I first became interested in medicine around my first year of college. I chose biomedical engineering because I had an interest in medicine, not very tangibly. I just thought it might be something that I liked. I didn't, coming into college, I knew I liked engineering, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. So I started shadowing in my freshman year of college, realized that I really liked it. It was something I wanted to do. So I spent a lot of time making sure that that was what I wanted to do. As everyone on this call probably knows, medicine is a very long, longitudinal pathway. So you do really want to make sure that it's what you want to do in case you hunker down and get into it and then you realize you're not that into it. So I worked, or so I started shadowing and then volunteering and then working a clinical job. So all of that really helped me make sure that medicine was what I wanted to do. And then on the side, I did engineering research, specifically in cardiovascular engineering. That was something I got interested in because of my shadowing. So one of the doctors that I worked with as a shadow, he told me that he directly collaborates with a lab at Georgia Tech and got me connected with them. So that was a really great opportunity for me to pursue research. And I did that for all so I started after my freshman year, so those 3 years of undergrad that I did research, and I also did a summer internship in Portland. That was just kind of something that I applied to on my own. So I had a few different kinds of research experience over my undergrad. And yeah, I'm starting medical school about a month from now, also in Georgia. I think this is kind of in the future for most people that are in high school right now, but you will kind of notice that in terms of medical school, and I've heard in terms of residency as well, there's a lot of like regional bias. So if you have a strong interest in staying in your home state, that will probably work in your favor. So I am staying in Georgia and I'm pretty excited to continue my journey there. So if people have questions in terms of medical school things. I don't really have answers for that because I don't have any experience in medical school yet. But in terms of biomedical engineering undergrad and also as a pre-med undergrad, I can answer any questions that people have been wondering about.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I do agree with the shadowing a doctor part because when I shadowed a doctor, I feel like I was able to learn so much more than just looking at YouTube videos or just studying biology in general because I also got to see what the medical assistant does and stuff. I was interested in that as well. Coming to the next question, what is biomedical engineering exactly for students in middle school and high school who are curious? Because we do have a couple middle schoolers here. What kinds of problems do biomedical engineers work on?
Yeah, so biomedical engineering is sort of a newer field. Um, well, at this point, I'd say it's becoming a very established field, but I'd say it probably started becoming very popular and like something that people majored in like the mid to late 2000s. Um, and different universities take a different interpretation as to what to biomedical engineering means because it's very broad. Um, Georgia Tech specifically, biomedical engineering is treated a little bit like a wing of mechanical engineering, but also a little bit like chemical engineering. So it's somewhere in the middle between those. Um, so there's one of the biggest parts of biomedical engineering is definitely the medical device industry. So medical devices can be literally anything that a healthcare professional works with in terms of devices. So this could be like a gurney or like an implantable surgical device or like the sutures that they're using, like really anything that a doctor or a nurse or a medical assistant is coming into contact with can fall into the realm of biomedical engineering, which is what makes it super, super cool to major in it because you are not really limiting yourself at all as to what you're interested in. As long as you want to be involved in healthcare, you can find a pathway for yourself. And then the other big biomedical engineering is pharmaceuticals. So that can sort of delve into chemical engineering a little bit. So it's a little bit here and there. I do have a lot of friends that went into pharmaceuticals after undergrad, so it's a very viable biomedical engineering pathway, but that definitely requires a little bit more of pharmacology, which isn't normally built into an undergrad. So you would probably take a little bit of extra coursework or extra internships to get that experience. Um, and then there's also like data science. Like statistics. There's like the coding aspect of it. Sometimes, if y'all have heard of Epic, it's a platform that is used by hospitals to like organize patient data. They would come to Georgia Tech to hire biomedical engineers. And then the other pathway is academia or medicine. Um, so those are similar, but not exactly the same. So, medicine, you would be pre-med all through undergrad, apply to medical school, either take a gap year or apply to medical school in your third year of undergrad. And then if you are interested in doing research, you would probably go either for a master's or a PhD. And you can do research in an academic institution, which is pretty common. But there's also, especially in the emerging startup world, there's a lot of opportunities for people interested in research and working in industry as well. So yeah, suffice to say, it's a very, very broad field. And yeah, depending on what school you go to, I'd say if you go to a tech school or you go to an engineering school, they're going to take a more mechanical engineering or chemical engineering approach to it. One of my cousins was a biomedical engineering major at UNC, I believe. And from what I heard from her, it's more of a biology centered major there. So yeah, it depends on what kind of program you're in. But overall, those like fields that I mentioned are what kind of careers that biomedical engineers go to.
Yeah, I think the types of school transitions perfectly into our next question from a student. And a student asked about what helped you get into Georgia Tech. Like, what activities or experiences during high school do you think shaped your application the most? Not exactly a resume, but just things that helped you grow. And again, if students are interested in asking questions, you can drop them in the chat below.
So, Georgia Tech specifically, I would say, is a pretty stat centered college. So, definitely SAT score, GPA is the first thing they're looking for. Um, so after that, considering that you have that, um, the next thing that I would say is important is to show an interest in whatever major you're applying for. So I applied to Georgia Tech as an environmental engineering major. So as I said, I was sort of figuring things out in my senior year of high school. But I had a lot of interest in um, solar panel technology specifically. I did my senior thesis project on solar panels. So I wrote about that in my essay. I talked about how specific resources that are available to students at Georgia Tech would help me continue my interest in environmental engineering. And even though that changed ultimately, the idea for a college application, whether it be for undergrad or even when I did it again to get into med school, it's all about having a theme, having like a cohesive flow to your application because the the reason that someone might not feel connected to saying someone on the admissions board might not feel connected to your application is if they feel like you're ticking boxes instead of finding what you are actually interested in. So try to, even if it's not exactly what you want to do, because almost every university will allow you to change and, find yourself in college or even like right before you start college. I think at Georgia Tech, the only exception to that is the CS department, because computer science is just so popular at Georgia Tech that they had to limit people transferring to it only in the last couple of years. But other than that, you're able to kind of change and become whoever you want to be in college. So I would say in your senior year of high school, sit down with everything that you have done over your high school years and try to create a theme or a story of who you are and what those involvements represent. And as long as that makes sense, you should be fine. So I guess like long-winded way of saying it doesn't really matter what you do as long as it's not just like 10 random things. Even if it's five cohesive things, that's better than 10 random, unrelated things.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that part is really confusing about trying to align yourself with your major instead of really figuring out who you are first and then looking at what interests you a lot. And we do have a few questions in the chat now. One of them is from Anika, and she's asking, did majoring in biomedical engineering as opposed to biology or other traditional pre-med majors affect your med school application? I understand that it is more difficult to maintain a strong GPA with an engineering major, which is important to med school.
Hmm. I think there's a few different aspects to it. First, I will agree. It is harder to do well, as in like get the grades as an engineering major, because engineers care a lot less about what your GPA was as much as what your work experience was. So when a company is looking at your resume as an engineering company, if you have a 3.7 GPA, but you have a whole list of internships and co-ops and whatever, they're going to glaze past that. They're going to say, okay, this person knows what they're doing. It's not really the same for med school, because the competition is so fierce. everyone is coming in with a really, really strong GPA. However, I think it was the right choice for me because I needed the time to figure out what I wanted. And I think biomedical engineering, or really doing a non-traditional pre-med major, anything, like even like majoring in economics, just something that isn't just biology and just or chemistry or biochemistry or neuroscience or whatever. It gives you a perspective outside of the pre-med mental zone because your friends in your classes or like the people you're around, most all of them, or for me at least, most all of them were not pre-meds. And even if they were when we were freshmen, by the time we were juniors, they weren't anymore. So non-traditional pre-med majors gives you the opportunity to become confident that this is what you want because the kind of the fire that you're walking through will help you get over any trepidations about not doing it. So if you're doing pre-med because your parents want you to be a doctor, if you major in something other than biology, you'll have the chance to think about what life might be if you didn't become a doctor. But I know that if you're in that scape with everybody around you going through the same thing, it's a lot easier to just be one of the sheep and just keep going with it because your friends are doing it too. So I absolutely recommend doing biomedical engineering. I loved it. But if that's not your thing, if something else is of your interest and you're like, oh, but it might be hard to maintain a GPA, no, go for it. Because one, will make your application more interesting because they are going to see 100 biology majors and then one something else every time they're looking through these applications. That's one benefit. And the second is that you start to actually create a sense of self, which is, I'd say, half the point of going to college.
Thank you. As for the pre-med majors and taking different majors, I did see that when I went to shadow a law firm, actually a business law firm. There were so many people who did biology, philosophy, and everything, and they ended up at law. So I think taking your major based on what you're actually interested doesn't mean you're restricted to that particular major for the rest of your life because you can definitely go and become something else if you want to. We have another question from Deepika. What was your initial career interest when you applied for biomedical engineering in undergrad? And did you ever have any consideration for a career in engineering?
Mm. So, yeah, like I said, I didn't apply as a biomedical engineer. I applied as an environmental engineer. Um, but I switched to VME because I was interested in pre-med and I wanted to like give myself a chance to see what the field of healthcare and medicine kind of looked like. And yes, I definitely had a lot of moments where I considered doing engineering. And doing engineering can mean a ton of different things. So I will say when I shadowed, I worked with or interacted with a lot of clinical technicians. So if anyone hasn't heard of that, clinical techs are people that are like device representatives from a medical device company, usually for surgical or implantable devices, and they will come to the OR or for me, I was in the catheter lab. So they would be there, they would be guiding the surgeons and the doctors through using the device, and making sure everything is going right, especially in the first few years of the release of the device. And I really, really liked that role. I thought it was super cool because it was somewhere in between, being in the hospital and actually being a doctor and serving patients that way, and, being really accustomed and, intimately involved with the design and the use of the devices. So that was a career consideration. And then I also really enjoyed research. So I considered doing a PhD. I considered like working in R&D or research and development for medical devices. Um, and I think giving myself the opportunity to experience those different things and ultimately decide that they weren't for me made me more able to eloquently talk about why I wanted to be a doctor in my medical school interviews. Um, and if anyone's curious why I didn't want to do those, I think I really, really enjoyed being in the patient room and being someone that could offer some sort of help to patients directly. And as a physician in the future, I would have the independence and the authority to make decisions on my patient's behalf, which all of these adjacent roles, like whether I'm in research or whether I'm as a device rep, is someone that is supporting the physician, either through research and data or through the device itself. And ultimately, I wanted to be in the role that was actually doing the task. Um, but that is different for everyone. So I know a lot of people that went into each of those fields that I mentioned, and they're really excited about it, and they found their calling through experience, just like I did. Um, so yeah, having that variety of experiences is really important. Um, but I will say you can start as early as you want. You don't need to wait until you're in college. If you can find people to shadow, if you can talk to people or like through webinars like this, if you can learn about different careers, that is great. Because the earlier you have it figured out, the earlier you can start building your resume.
Thank you. I do. Experience does really matter in shadowing people, especially because I remember I shadowed a law firm, a business law firm, sophomore year of high school, and I did like it. And then I shadowed a doctor. I started shadowing a doctor and volunteering at a clinic last summer. And then I realized I liked it a little more. And then that's when I started going into, oh, what is medicine exactly? Like, what is it to be a doctor and all of that? Because before I didn't really explore it, I kind of closed the doors to different pathways for me, but really being open minded and looking at different careers like law, medicine, environmental science, like actually looking at everything made me realize it is sort of interconnected in a way, and I can have interest in all of them and try to find this intersection where I can particularly work on. You did mention working as an ophthalmology technician. How did that clinical experience sort of shape your understanding of medicine?
I think clinical employment is the best way to figure out if you like patient interaction, or if you like being patient facing. Because, like I mentioned, there's a lot of ways to be involved in clinical care or in medicine. There's a lot of ways you can help people without being a doctor or without being patient facing, like doctor, nurse, MA, whatever. So I started direct, like, mm, so volunteering is patient facing for sure, especially if you volunteer at a hospital regularly, like you are talking to patients. But when you have the responsibility of your tasks, whatever they are, as someone who's employed by a clinic, you start to, become someone that is, how do I say this? It's more impactful because you're not just going with the motions. You're not just like, okay, like directing someone in the hospital or picking up the phone and saying, they're in this room, which is kind of what volunteering is like. So as I was, I think they called it an ophthalmic technician. Um, so you have to be an MA, you have to get like a MA license, but I wasn't licensed, so I was a technician. But I was pretty much doing a medical assistant role. There weren't any medical assistants at my clinic. which meant I was rooming patients, taking their vision, taking their eye pressure, doing multiple different tests depending on whatever conditions they had. And this was on patients from like 6 months old to like 100 years old. So you really kind of learn how the whole patient interaction thing goes. And that was the most important experience for me to be able to talk about for my medical school applications. And um, like when everyone, whoever's interested in it, becomes pre-med, you'll start hearing that clinical experience is like the number one most important thing to have on your application, and that is true. And I would say employed clinical experience is even better than non-employed clinical experience because you have more responsibility inherently. And for me in ophthalmology, there's a lot more things that a technician can do from what I've heard. Because in like a cardiology clinic, I think it's more like taking history and then blood pressure, and then usually the doctor steps in after that. But in ophthalmology, there's a lot of like small tests that you're getting done or imaging and whatever. So I got to learn a ton of different skills and really like test myself under pressure almost because I was learning this on the job. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was a great way to make sure that I wanted to do it. And it also exposed me to different physicians and let me learn about different styles of practicing medicine. So there were like 8 or 9 doctors at the clinic that I worked at, and each of them saw different patient populations and worked very differently. They would see different numbers of patients. Some of them would only be in the clinic that I worked at one day of the week, and they would be around the city, like different locations each day of the week. So it also helped me understand what being a doctor could be like. So I think for anyone who's considering medicine, once you're 18, usually you can't, I don't know, they might allow it, but where I'm from, they only really start hiring when you're in college. So as soon as you can, as soon as you have the means to, or you have a car, or you can get to where you need to go, I would try to get a clinical job to kind of force yourself to take responsibility.
Yeah, and I think I read about it last week or so. If you're 16 plus, you can become a CNA or a pharmacy technician depending on where you live. So if you're really interested in discovering something else other than just volunteering or shadowing a doctor or volunteering in a hospital, I think that's also pretty nice to check out. I want to ask you about the medical pathway specifically because we've talked about so many things like clinical experience and pre-med and everything. Because a lot of students did submit questions about that. Especially since you did take biomedical engineering, how were you able to complete the pre-med major requirements, med school prerequisites, MCAT, and so on?
Yeah. So my first recommendation, if you can, go to a school with a medical school because um those schools will usually have a very established pre-med system and have a lot of support and a lot of opportunity. Georgia Tech is an engineering school and doesn't have a medical school. So pre-med is not the school's priority, which is fine. I didn't have a lot of trouble because of that. But I think it would have been easier if there was a medical school that I had access to automatically just by going to the institution. And I know that's not possible for everyone because obviously it wasn't possible for me, which is fine. But if you can, if you're choosing between 2 colleges and you know you want to be pre-med, I would put some weight behind the fact that one of them has a medical school. So in terms of the way it works, you can do any major and be a pre-med because medical schools generally have the same requirements. And I say generally because some of them require certain things that others don't. And I wouldn't worry too much about it because they're almost all the same. But sometimes there's like a little like nitpicky stuff that they're like, oh, they require one extra non-science class and you're scrambling to take another science class. So if you have a few schools that you're considering, I guess for everyone on this call, this is a lot in the future, but when you're considering medical schools, if you already know that a few of them are like, I'm definitely applying to these schools, when you're in your freshman or sophomore year, just go ahead and look up all their requirements and then go talk to your counselor and build that into your 4 year plan or how many ever years you're taking for undergrad. So the general requirements are general chemistry, 2 semesters of general chemistry with lab, organic chemistry, 2 semesters with lab, biochemistry, 1 semester usually, um, usually English, um, calculus. Yes, I think up to calculus. Um, I think that might be it. Yes. So the big thing, oh, biology, obviously. Yes, biology. So the big thing is usually chemistry. It's the big hurdle to get over because almost everything else. Oh, sorry, I forgot about physics. Physics. You have to have 2 semesters of college level physics. So everything other than chemistry, you can usually knock out in high school with AP credits. But that is another hurdle because a lot of medical schools don't accept, or not a lot, some medical schools don't accept AP credits for the requirements. So I had some friends who retook classes in college that they had already taken for APs because they didn't want to deal with the issue of not counting. But for me, that didn't end up being a problem because, like for physics, I took physics and physics, what, C, I think is what it was called. C, mechanics and electricity and magnetism. I took them in high school, and they, for some schools, they physics especially is a problem. For some schools, it didn't count. But I, as an engineering major, had taken multiple upper level physics courses, so I could just say, like, okay, I didn't take physics 1 and 2 in college, but I took, statics and biomechanics and biotransport and whatnot, and kind of prove to them that I do know how to do physics. But I think most everybody has probably heard that orgo is like the big fish when it comes to being pre-med. And I will have to agree, orgo is pretty tough. And a lot of people get to orgo and then they bounce. They're like, okay, pre-med's not for me, which I think is so valid. I think honestly that's probably half the reason they require it. Is like you get to know whether you're cut out for the long haul when you get to orgo. But it's definitely not impossible. I didn't have any issue balancing it with my engineering courses. Um, Definitely taking APs supported that though, because not having to take intro level classes meant that I could like get started on all my upper level classes in my freshman year. And that put me ahead of a lot of people and made my life a lot easier. So I would recommend that if you can, take as many APs that count as you can. Um, oh, statistics is another one, but usually you have to take that in college. So biostatistics, the AP credit usually doesn't count. Um, and then there's like a few recommended classes. Um, Microbiology, I believe, sometimes is recommended. I didn't take microbiology, but I took anatomy and I took pathology, and I 100% recommend. Pathology is like was for fun, but I think anatomy 100% because it's very hard to get into medicine without having anatomy as a foundation. And I don't know, honestly, don't know why they don't require it because I think it was. I took it in my freshman year of college, and I it was like the basis for the rest of my degree. It really, really helped me throughout both engineering and pre-med. So I would take anatomy as soon as you can. Um, and then in terms of other requirements, the other big one is the MCAT. So the MCAT is an 8-hour exam that you have to take before you apply to medical school. So the things that you're required to submit for your primary medical school application are your MCAT score, your GPA, all of your coursework with all your requirements completed or about to be completed in your fourth year of college, and your personal statement and your works. So like all your involvements. So you have like little blurbs about each of those. So the MCAT has, well, I guess, how deep do you want me to go into how the MCAT is? Because I feel like I might talk about the MCAT for a while, and I don't know how valid that is for everyone involved here.
I think just a general,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So MCAT has 4 sections. So it's chemistry and physics, biology and biochemistry, critical analysis, which is like a reading section, and then psychology and sociology. So all of that is stuff that you will learn. Um, I wouldn't say all of it. Most of that is stuff you will definitely learn in your pre-med requirements, but psychology and sociology is not usually a requirement, even though it's on the MCAT. I didn't take psychology or sociology, but I had no problem self-studying for it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. If that's not like something you want to do, definitely not an issue to self-study just for the MCAT. Um, and then the MCAT is scored up till 528. And there's like different percentile scores. So you get a number score and you also get a percentile score, depending on how many people got around that score range. And then it's graded on a curve. So depending on how everybody else that took it on the exact same date as you did, your score will be curved to to have like an equal distribution according to the percentiles.
Wow, okay, that was,
Yeah, that was a lot of information.
yeah. The MCAT just seems like a lot, but I think it's nice that whatever courses you take or whatever the pre-med requisites are, it's good that it prepares you for it rather than it being an exam you need to entirely self-study for. We do have one question from Dhruti. She's asking if you did any shadowing experiences during high school, and if so, where did you find those opportunities?
I did not. So I was in my sophomore year of high school when COVID happened. So I think I could have tried a little bit harder, but I was pretty much getting like, no, like we're not allowing anybody to come into the clinic right now. It was kind of just an awkward time for me to try to get shadowing. So I didn't put that much effort behind it because I knew it would be pretty tough. Um, but I will say, and this might sound bad, but the best way to get shadowing is through your parents' friends. If your parents aren't doctors, which mine aren't, try to get your parents to think of anybody that they know that might be a doctor, or somebody that they know whose sister is a doctor or whose friend is a doctor. Like connections of connections of connections. Because unfortunately, doctors are incredibly busy people and often do not check their email or their messages from people that they don't know. So it will be hard to get contact with doctors who don't know you. So if you can find someone that knows you or your parents and beg and plead with them to let you into their clinic, I think that is an amazing opportunity for a high schooler. And if that is not an option, then your doctor, your pediatrician, or whoever else you're going to, or your parents' doctors, they might let you come into their clinic. Um, how else? I'd say like if you know somebody at a university, like if you have a family friend who's a professor, and then that professor's that works at that college has a medical school, or like has some connections to a local hospital, that could be a great way to do it. But basically what I'm saying is it all kind of just runs on connections because doctors don't really read their emails.
Okay, thank you. And we have a couple last questions before we wrap up. We have a question that, oh, it's a middle schooler and they're going to grade 8 next year and they're interested in science and they're asking what they can do during the summer to explore their interests and if you have any resources.
Mm. I would say a lot of times universities have like summer camps that you can do. I don't know when I did it, but I did a few at Georgia Tech when I was younger. Um, but those can be a little bit pricey. So other than that, I think, hmm, middle school is tough. I think I did Girls Who Code, and this might not work if this question is from a boy, but that is a good one. You can get some experience in coding. Um, yeah, I think it's pretty tough, especially in medicine or in research when you're that young. So I would try those like summer camps if that is like within your budget. Um, and if not, then just trying to find those connections for the future. So when you're in high school, it's really only 1 year away. It's not gonna set you back so much if you're starting when you're in ninth grade instead of eighth grade. Um, that would be a good start.
Thank you so much. And we just have one last question before we wrap up. It's about passion and burnout, which is something I'm pretty sure everyone's curious about because medicine is known to be such a long and demanding path. And I just want to know how passionate does someone need to be to pursue medicine and how passionate are you? And I'm pretty sure you've encountered a lot of challenges on the way and how do you just stay motivated to still pursue medicine?
A common theme or like common thing that you'll hear from a lot of people in terms of answering this question is to remember your why medicine. So when you're writing your personal statement for medical school, the question that you're answering in your personal statement is why medicine? Why are you interested in medicine? So that is what keeps you going for the most part. But also, um, I think almost everyone who pursues medicine loves learning, like loves studying, as nerdy as it sounds. You kind of have to be that person. You kind of have to be the one that everyone is like, oh, this person's kind of a loser. They love studying. Because you when you go into this pathway, especially starting from the point that you start studying for the MCAT, you will realize that you are almost like signing your soul away to the studying gods because that is all you will be doing for the rest of your life. Even after you become an attending doctor, you keep up with shelves and boards. You have to constantly be studying and updating your knowledge and taking exams to stay with the times because medicine is such a changing field. Every day, new things are coming out, and like the gold standard is changing. So to avoid burnout, I would definitely say my biggest strategy is to remember that there isn't much else that I'd rather be doing. And there are always struggles in any field that you choose. And just because I'm going to be in school for a lot longer than my peers are, that doesn't mean that I'm going through more tough times than they are. Because when you are on this like medicine pathway, you kind of have the security of knowing that there is something ahead. But when I talk to my friends who are going into industry or they're, trying to find a job right now, they're kind of staring into the abyss of nothing, which is sometimes a little bit scarier than, knowing for a fact that you won't be done until you're in your mid 30s. So there's always a push or pull, give or take, in this world of finding a career. So I would say if you're going to go for medicine, shadow, get clinical experience, make sure it's something that you actually want to do because there are a lot of ways to get involved in medicine that aren't being a doctor and that don't require as much exams and school and money. And then if you're sure that that's what you want to do, become the person that loves studying. Even if that's not you today, that is someone you can become. You can convince yourself that you love studying. Start brainwashing yourself as soon as you can, and then you'll be fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shobana. And I do agree with the part about there's so many other ways to get involved in health than just being a doctor. Because when I was shadowing the physician at the clinic I volunteer at, I realized there's also a medical assistant who does a lot of work, and we also have like CNAs and nurse practitioners, and there's so many other things you can explore in the field of health. There's also public health and the environment. There's so many environmental impacts on health now, and we need people to look into that more. So there are a lot of different fields in health than just being a physician or a doctor. So thank you so much again, Shobana, for taking the time to speak with us today and for sharing your journey so openly. I liked how the journey wasn't linear and you went to biomedical engineering in the beginning and then decided to become a doctor. And thank you to everyone who joined us and submitted such thoughtful questions. As always, we'll share the webinar recording and resources afterward on our website and social media. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Have a great evening, Shobana.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.